Good morning. Today, I'd like to talk to you about Truth 6, which is the truth of purification, health, and illness. So I'd like to start with my personal favorite law, which is the Law of Correspondence. In this law, it states that there are three great planes: the physical plane, the mental plane, and the spiritual plane. So the spiritual plane is linked to the principle of mentalism, where all is mind. Everything is stored in the energy field. And what happens from there is, from that sort of spiritual energy field, we then get our mind. And then from our mind, we then create our body. In my book, The Seven Gates, I talk about how the body is the loyal servant to the psyche. And the psyche, as a result, is in relationship or corresponding to the planes of the universe. So there's a direct relationship between our spirit, our mind, and our physical body. I oftentimes, when see clients, they tell me that they're having physical issues. I understand the spiritual root or the mental process that they're working through as a result of their body. I can look at somebody and see certain distribution of weight or scars on their body, and I can tell about the battlefield in their mind. So it's very much related. The law of correspondence, as I've said before, as within, so without. Whatever's happening externally is a direct relationship to what's happening internally. And the body, if we look at it as an external manifestation of what's happening internally as the spirit and the mind, we can use that correspondence to see that as well. The law states that in every part, particle, unit, or combination within the universe, you can see the all. And that is not, that's in addition to or inclusive of the physical form as well. The physical is not separate. This is actually a big struggle that people have in spirituality, and we've seen this throughout time. We've seen the fakirs sort of beat themselves because the body is impure, the body is a source of pleasures and desires. But actually, the body is considered the form or the container or the vehicle for the divine. So it's about taking care of the body, not beating up because it succumbs to the desires of the flesh. In previous chats, I've told you about my spiritual TED Talk, thoughts, emotions, and desires. Thoughts, emotions, and desires are all energy, and you'll see today the shamanic definition of illness is energetic. Those thoughts, emotions, and desires are energy. So even though you can't maybe touch them or feel them like a cup, they have that same composition. They're not as dense. But basically, if we don't break them down, if we don't process thought, emotion, and desire, it enters the body and materializes as an illness, as a nail breaking, a migraine, or even cancer. So these are absolutely in relationship. All of the particles of this greater spiritual plane will trickle down into our body and tell us what's going on in the spiritual world and in our mental space. So illness in spiritual tradition is oftentimes viewed as an initiation and an opportunity for purification. In shamanism, we say that all illness is energetic. So if someone comes with cancer, or if they come with a broken leg, what we do is we sort of travel upstream to see what the energetic causes are. So this is linked to the law of correspondence. Illness is often viewed as an initiation process. Something that I've written extensively about is that illness gives us an opportunity to grieve the life that we previously had. And it allows us to create space in the world where the world actually allows you to take time. They understand that you're sick, so it creates a space so that you can decide to work on your spirit or your spiritual life. Illness is also a purification process. We have very deep, dark thoughts. And what happens is oftentimes we use the body as a way to purify the fact that we had thoughts. So they equal to the fakir beating themselves up. We will, with our thoughts, when we have sort of dirty thoughts or impure thoughts, purify those and engage in purification processes I'll talk about momentarily, so that we can sort of cleanse ourselves of the thoughts that we had. In the Vedas, It's discussed that oftentimes sick children in a family are a reason that families seek spirituality. So it can be sort of a link to seeking spirit and not just living in the material world. Illness also has a function that it reminds us that we're in the body. I mentioned that we're all fire, we're all divine, we're all narcissists because of this fire and this divine nature that we have. What happens is that divine nature needs a container, and the body is a reminder that we're human. It's a reminder that we have a body, and that fire element, and today I'm going to talk more about the element that you have in your psyche, needs a container in some force. And so when we suffer, we have pain, or we have illness, whether it's emotional, mental, or spiritual, or physical illness, it's a reminder to be here now in the earth, and that we are human. It brings us back to the present moment, because when we feel things, whether it's physical pain or emotional pain, we're actually alive. We're not numbed to the human experience, and we can relate to others at the humanity level. Illness is linked to a loss of power and a violation of boundaries. I'm going to talk a bit about value systems. This is extremely important in all the work that I do, is this link to values, and how when we don't have values, we self-betray. When we violate our boundaries or our value system, we actually get sick as a relationship to violation of those boundaries. So in some cultures, shamanism initiation can be called a shinbyong. It's a spiritual sickness. You see in some religions that sickness is looked at down, that the family is some sort of evil, and it's a sense of purification, and they even might outcast certain families if there's an illness and is viewed as dirty or impure. But in many cultures, this shinbyong concept of spiritual sickness is that the spirit takes over your body. You can have physical symptoms like fever, insomnia, nausea, vomiting, loss of appetite, hallucinations, is actually linked to inducing or initiating the new shaman into the tradition. And it's only through the illness that the person is sort of called to a shamanistic calling or a shamanistic path. Dr. Stanislav Grof wrote a book called Spiritual Emergency, where he links a lot of these spiritual emergencies, spiritual illnesses, schizophrenia and such to actual spiritual initiations. Carl Jung has written on shamanism, and there's a book called Jung on Shamanism by Dr. Michael Smith that speaks about these initiatory and purification processes as well. So our body and breaking down of our body is oftentimes making way for spirit and a spiritual life in our life to occur. So one of the theories that I'm working on extensively now is this need to feel embodied, to feel pain or have a shared human experience through the body. And I've been working with a lot of clients lately about the ascendant, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. You don't need astrology. You do need to know your birth time to be able to do this activity, because it will tell you the ascendant. And we're not looking at the sign, but we're rather looking at the element. However, I've been asking a lot of people about their birth story lately. And in my theory, the birth story is directly related to transitions. And illness is often, like I said, considered a transition from more of a materially lived life to an initiation into a spiritually focused life. So a lot of women have told me, especially older clients, that their mothers were numbed. They were numbed during the birth process. They'd go to sleep, and the next morning they'd be handed over their baby. I know in my particular birth story that my mother had no time for anesthesia. And I'm one of these people that I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't engage in sort of numbing practices. And I actually enjoy feeling the depths of all the emotion. And so it's part of my lived experience in my birth process. So I invite you to look at, were you numbed? What was the process of birth in terms of anesthesia and numbing? And how do you live in your life that way in your body? Do you try to numb your emotions, your feelings, using drugs, alcohol, sex, shopping? Everybody has some sort of coping mechanism, but it would be interesting to see the relationship from your birth story to the way that you feel or fail to feel in your body. So the thing I'd like to talk about today and teach you is something about the elements. So in astrology, there's two things. You can have these unequal houses or you can have equal houses. So this is directly using an equal house system, but you don't need to know any of that. Basically, you need to put your birthday, time, and place into a free astrology program, and your ascendant is going to be this line right here. It's the cusp of your first. It is going to be in either air, fire, earth, and water, and you can Google the sign and what element it's in. Mine is in Sagittarius, which is fire. There is an element right before fire in the way that the elements were distributed upon the earth being created. The one prior to fire is water. And in the sense of where the wheel is, don't look at it as a creation, but just in terms of the way that the astrology signs are. So my element on my ascendant is fire, meaning I come from a water matrix. What this means is spiritually from past lives, emotionally and mentally, the way that I think, the way that I'm psychologically structured is in a water element. That's very much about intuition and emotion, which would describe me pretty spot on. What I will do to be embodied, what I will do to feel that I joined the human race, what I will do to be here now present and using my body to house that water element is that I need to break down the water element and I need to become or embody the fire element. So what I have here is every element that comes from the 12th house cusp in the equal houses, or like I said, if you don't know astrology, look up the element of your ascendant, air, fire, earth, or water, and then the one prior, there's only 4, so they rotate. The one prior is the one that you come from past lives, you embody in this one, and you're trying to actually become the element of your ascendant. So fire needs earth, earth needs air, air needs water, and like me, water needs fire. So I'll just start here since this is mine. I come from a water structure and I need to become a fire structure. Things that I might suffer from are melancholy and envy, and what I need the fire element to teach me is courage, to become more joyful, to be more light and bright, and that's actually exactly what my Cancer process taught me. So illness oftentimes in the first house cusp isn't necessarily illness, that's the 6th house, but the 1st house is the body, and we will process and embody ourselves in this lifetime based on this element. So if fire is your previous, so if on your 12th house cusp you have Leo, Aries, or Sagittarius, you need earth. Your earth sign will be the cusp, which is Taurus, Virgo, or Capricorn. You suffer from cowardice, fear, and what you need is containment. The fire might be too big or you play too small and you need it to be just right, contained in the earth, which is the body. Earth, if your 12th house cusp is earth, you need air. You suffer from hyperanalysis, maybe control, details. You want to know everything. There's a hoarding or an avarice tendency, and what you need is more openness. Air is the quality of openness, curiosity, questioning. Air people need water. I just had a client this week who was an air structure, and I asked her, I said, how did you create the crisis of the water, the emotional connection to humanity through the water of your ascendant? She's like, I have an autistic son. So then our things in our life start to make sense, that we created them for a reason so that we can actually be embodied here and now. These people might suffer from vanity and deceit, and what they need is emotion. So they'll create emotional circumstances, for instance, like this client. And I already mentioned water needing fire. So this is how you live in the body. This is how you're trying to embody, and you will create chaos. You will create situations, emotional emergencies, physical illnesses, so that you can feel that you are human, that you're present, and that your divine essence is in containment. So the myth I'd like to share with you is the myth of Hercules and the girdle of Hippolyte. Hippolyte was the queen of the Amazonians, and she wore Aphrodite's girdle of chastity. And Hercules was given the task to go get the girdle. So he shows up at the island of the Amazons, and he's not listening to Hippolyte. Hippolyte had been warned and told that he was coming to get it. So as you see in the picture, she's handing it to him. The thing is, he's in such a defensive stance. Look at his leg, look at his sword. In the card of the tarot of the hangman, you will see this exact symbol of the hangman crossing his legs this way. And then the sword is ready to go. His hand is in a defensive stance. This happens to us. We don't listen. We don't listen to other people. We're always in a defensive to respond. Oftentimes we lose sight of what the law of correspondence will gift us from another person's mouth if we're just in a defensive stance to answer. This is also in relationship to the body. We do not listen to our body. We don't want to feel, we want to fix. We don't necessarily check in with what the body is telling us. And so if we fail to listen, we fail to get a lot of valuable information. So what happens is, without listening to her, he kills her. And he grabs the girdle and he realizes what he's done after he kills her. And so as he's leaving the island, he sees Hesione, who's drowning, and he jumps in to save her. And this is oftentimes what we do. We engage in an unhealthy practice, let's say over drinking, over sex, over shopping, over indulging in pancakes, whatever it is. And as a result, we want to purify. So we get on a man cleanse, a diet, a shopping cleanse, on a financial diet, something to restrict or purify the behavior that we indulged in. And these swings of 0 to 100 are actually linked to the law of polarity, and we don't get balance. And a lot of us spend our life going through these swings of 0 to 100, engaging in a behavior and purifying from the behavior. And just like Hercules, he had to sort of compensate or purify the fact that he killed Hippolyte for no reason by helping Hesione and saving another body. So we're in a constant self-sabotage. We're in a constant self-betrayal where we don't know our values, we don't honor our bodies, we're not listening to our intuition or our bodies, and then we get on these diets or we abstain in an attempt to purify the body. And that's what we see in the spiritual literature from previous religions, where there was a lot of beating and purification of the flesh because it was deemed to trick us into engaging in passions and desires that we shouldn't. And it's not. 50% of our day, of our life, should be dedicated to the material. Thoughts, emotions, and desires provide a lot of information for us. And then 50% of our activities should be working perhaps through those, identifying our values, analyzing our thoughts in a more spiritual context. But to think that the body needs to be eliminated or destroyed is part of this idea that the body is bad, and has led to a lot of spiritual problems and people leaving the church, for instance, because of these teachings that have been taught incorrectly. Now, I remind you that Truth 1 and Truth 6, which is this one, are ones that we have to engage in daily. In Truth 1, Abderus was killed. He collected the man-eating mares. That's our thoughts. We have to look at our thoughts daily, which will be directly linked to our diet, our body, our purification, our illnesses, our health. And every day we need to engage with our body in some sort of self-care activity. Now, I've spoken adamantly about $10 green juices and eating organic. If your thoughts are not purified, if you're not looking at your thoughts, save your money and don't go to Whole Foods. However, you are engaged in a thought process, emotion, desire, low-level consciousness, intuition, purification, individuation process, all of the previous, then you absolutely would want to be engaged in eating well and devising some sort of healthy eating or exercise habit. So we have to remember that we're constantly looking at our thoughts and looking at purifying our body. And this does not mean engaging in a behavior of 0 to 100 or excessive exercise or excessive organic dieting or eating super, super clean. It's moderation. It goes back to the 48 to 52, which is the next truth. We have to find that midpoint, what works for us. And so these are truths that we have to repeat constantly and daily so that we can be in a sort of spiritual process. Without cleansing our thoughts, without purifying our thoughts, without breaking down our thoughts, we will not know why our body is failing us and why we're feeling what we're feeling. So the word Valere in Latin actually means to be in good health. And what this is directly linked to your norms, your values, your philosophy of life, your rule book. I've said this before. Most people do not have a rule book to live by, do not have a value system. In a previous lecture, I asked you to identify your top 2 values, not family, and define them clearly in objective and observable terms. Most people struggle with this. The word valer in Spanish is actually self-worth, to feel that something is of worth. Valor is courage. And so we see courage, we see the ability to individuate, we see the ability to utilize our time, money, resources, set boundaries, have a rule book, know exactly how we're showing up in the world, linked to this. But it's linked back to being in good health. And I'll share some definitions of health. And I invite you today to define your own definition of health so that you know how you want to show up in the world, healthy in terms of your body, your mind, your spirit, and your value system. So do you have the courage to live your values and be in good health? So I had a client this week, and we were talking about how much of his day is spent on spiritual activities versus financial or earthly activities. And he has a spiritual business. And I said, you understand that just because it's packaged as spirit doesn't mean it's spiritual work. It's still a business, it's an earthly activity. So we have to identify how much time we're giving to our spirit and to our matter. And there should be equally distributed. Earlier in the series, I talk about how we slowly build up to a 48 to 52 or a 50-50 of spirit. So I was in Orlando last week with my daughter. And one of the things that I'm working on is my values around the service industry and tipping, especially now with COVID, that industry was hit very hard. And I had never really thought about how I wanted to show up in the world. And this is my tipping is linked to my money. My money is a part of my self-worth. It's a value system I need to get very clear on. So it's one of the things I'm working on. It's material in nature, you think, because it's financial, but it's directly linked to my value system, which means it's a spiritual activity. So I've been deciding how much I want to tip, what I think good service is, defining what good or bad service is, what my rule book is around tipping, around takeout, around Uber Eats, developing a value system around how I'm going to spend my money when I choose to eat out. And if we do this with our exercise, our food, our tipping, our financial activities, our sexual activities, this is how we develop a rule book. This is how we live healthily. This is how we're in good health. This is how we're courageous to live our values. So in good universe form, I'm out to lunch with a group of people from work. And the waitress brings a little laptop type thing, iPad type thing to put in the credit card and put the tip, and she walks away. And I guess the way that these things are set up is to like give 20, 25, 30% tip. And I wanted to try out my policy. It wasn't such a great service that day. So I decided 15. I was going to feel my way through tipping 15%. And it was nowhere to show up. And my colleague next to me, he's like, oh, you just press that button for the tip because they're automatically calculated. And I said, no. I said, I want to give 15% because I'm trying out my value system around this, about what I think about tipping and bad service. But the universe offers me an opportunity to self-betray and to not show up for myself, not have the courage to speak up. And I did, and I pressed the 15, I figured it out, and I was on my way. What I did was I sat with the feeling. Did it feel right? Did it feel good to do that? Was that true? And that's the process. That's the spiritual work linked to a financial activity. One of my pillars of health is financial health. I have to feel what feels true to me. There are no right or wrong answers. You can go to Emily Post and you can figure out tipping calculators and what the norm is, but you've got to check in with yourself. And this is with every area of your life. And today's activity is about writing a rule book and having a philosophy of life in every area of your life. So when you have the valor, the values, and the courage to live as your value system indicates, and you define these things and you feel them and you test them out, then you will have good health. So there are several definitions of health. The World Health Organization says that health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. Some people will say that disease is simply, health is the absence of disease. This is a food for thought pyramid where this person is talking about nutrition, talking about relationships, talking about luck, which we know in spirituality doesn't exist, talk about purpose and meaning, socioeconomic factors, exercise, emotional resilience, prayer. So they broke down their pillars of health as a triangle and in these mind, body, spirit activities. Ayurveda has an adage, and here it is written in Sanskrit. And in a nutshell, it's that health is established in self. Doshas has to do with the tissues. Agni has to do with the fire, like the third chakra, digestion abilities, properly formed tissues, elimination of waste, going to the bathroom, bodily process functioning properly, and clarity of mind, bliss and saturating soul uses the senses and the mind appropriately. So the Ayurveda definition of health is extremely extensive and also includes mind, body, spirit. So I ask you, what are your pillars of health? What make up your definition of health? Is it a financial standing? Is it a sexual standing or a relationship standing? Is it emotional and how you deal and feel your emotions? Is it mental? Is it spiritual? Is it physical? There can be as many as you want. It's your definition, but get very clear on what your definition of health is, what your values are linked to those aspects, those pillars, so you can start living in a definition of health that's in allegiance to your value system and that you're not self-betraying. So one activity for this truth is to write a rule book and a philosophy of life about your pillars of health. So in my book, The 7 Gates, I recommend to people to divide their notebook into various sectors in alignment with the astrology chart. If you like astrology, you might want to look at it as health or body, personality, your thoughts, your career goals, your social relationships. But if not, here I have 5: financial, sexual, spiritual, emotional, and physical. You might want to have something more with mental. You might want to have something more in terms of social relationships, whatever are your pillars. Just define what those are and create subsections in your notebook so that you can start writing out clearly what your values are around that. You may not know your values. You may need to Google to see what other people feel. That's all okay. That's research gathering. And once you gather your research, like I did with my tipping situation, then I started feeling my way as I tried different things out. When I was away last weekend, I gave a little more. In terms of takeout, I've been practicing. In terms of pickup service. So you start feeling to see if it's true to your values, if it feels right in your body. That goes back to 3 when we talked about emotions and the breath. So write your rules around that particular pillar of health in your body so that you can feel your way and see if that holds the truth. The second activity of this week is how do you purify your body? Do you purify your body with exercise and good food after you've binged all weekend on alcohol? Do you just naturally eat well and have conscientiousness around food? One of the things I discovered after cancer was I didn't have a philosophy of life around food, and I had to find one. So I tried out different things. I tried vegan, I tried organic, I tried FODMAPs, and I finally developed what works for me. So why are you eating well? Is it linked to trying to purify some previous thought or impure thought or behavior that you did previously, like Hercules? Do you engage in healthy eating and exercise? I just recently started this gym down the street, 2 days a week, 20 minutes, and it's for strength building. It includes cardio as well. Something doable, fits in my body. It is to check a box. I struggle with the body. I struggle with giving my body what it deserves. So I have to work actively on including, since I'm a Pisces, I'm so prone to the spirit world, I have to feel embodied. I have to make a conscious effort to be in the body and to feel my way through and eat well and exercise. And I'll leave you with this last thought. How did mom or dad or caretaker take care of you when you were sick? Oftentimes, the way that we were cared for when we were sick is directly linked to how we get sick now, how we self-betray so that we can get that way of being taken care of. So if it was the only way that you were allowed to stay home from school, you might get sick physically so that you have permission to take a day off from work, rather than just understanding that there are just some days that you need a day off. So look and see this week if you can identify the way you purify thoughts and body in 0 to 100 swings, and try to identify the midpoint, the 48 to 52, and also what correlation with how you were taken care of, whether it was certain foods, whether it was allowed to watch TV, stay home from school, what was given to you, how was illness treated in your home as a child, and how it relates back to the illnesses that you create now, or the way that you care about your body and purify your body now. Thank you very much. Have a lovely weekend.